Good morning, grade fours. It is Wednesday. We are halfway through the week. I hope that you are having a fantastic week so far. And today is actually quite a very important day, a very special day, because today is World Earth Day. And so I just wanted to start off this lesson to say that I hope today you really think about possibly either yourself or encouraging others to make sure that your lights are switched off in your house, to save and conserve electricity, to look at recycling, to doing all kinds of things to try and protect our earth. Remember, we've only got one earth and this is all we have. So let's stick together and let's help our earth. And so today is World Earth Day. Even if today you go and sit outside in the sun with sunscreen and a hat and you just look around yourself, look around nature, listen to the birds, look at plants, since we've been learning a lot about plants, spend the day outside. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that, World Earth Day. Okay, so I'm going to start this lesson off with a little bit of humor. Now, I am the type of person that I absolutely love lame jokes. You know, those types of jokes that they call them dad jokes. I absolutely love them, and half the time I also always laugh at myself, and that's just me. I think it's important to have fun when you learn. And so I am going to start every lesson with a joke to get us excited, to get us ready, to just put us in a good mood to start our lesson. Okay, so are you ready? This is a science-y joke. What did the science book say to the math book? Want to know? What did the science book say to the math book? My word, you have lots of problems. Do you get it? Math problems. Anyways, I hope that some of you are laughing. Either you're laughing at me because I'm so silly, or you're laughing at the joke because I think it's a great joke. Very dry, but great. Anyways, right, boys and girls, let's get started with science today. So we are still busy with life and living, but today we are going to look at the habitats of animals and plants specifically. So, starting us off, I want to ask the question, what is an environment? So maybe pause the video, give it a think a little bit. If I say to you, what would be your definition, a little bit tongue-tied there, what would be your definition of the word environment? What would it be? Right. An environment is where plants and animals live together in many different environments around the world. Plants and animals live together, they function together, and there's a whole ecosystem within this particular environment. An environment are all the living plus the non-living things in that place. And I'm going to speak a little bit about non-living things. It's things that we have done before. I don't know if you can hear Pebbles. He's busy singing. He's agreeing with me. And so it's all the living and non-living things. Remember, it's all of those, and a thing can only be classified as living if it performs the 7 life processes that we learnt about, and if it is non-living, it means it cannot perform one of the 7, and so it would be classified as non-living. Now, the environment is also the surroundings, so it includes air, water, plants, and animals. And because it includes it all, each kind of environment has different kinds of animal habitats. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at that environment, what makes that environment from the living and non-living aspects of those environments, and then specifically how it forms that particular habitat for plants and animals to live in. Right. So that now brings us to one of the main sort of the focus of today's lesson is we are going to look at habitats. What is a particular habitat? Now, a habitat is a physical area or a place where an animal or a plant lives. An organism's natural habitat has everything it needs to live and survive, including biotic and abiotic factors. So now these are 2 new words that I'm going to continuously also refer to, because remember, it is important to talk science Always talk and use these new words and vocabulary that you are learning, because the more you talk science, the more confident you are going to get. And science is always, it's very specific, it's very accurate, and the language in science is very, very important. So the word biotic is a fancy word for talking about all the living factors. So anything in a habitat that is living, plants, animals that are living, even from your bacteria and your germs and all of that is in that habitat. Germs and bacteria is living, it's a living organism. Then abiotic is the opposite. Abiotic factors are the non-living factors. And those factors would include rocks, water, air, soil. Remember, not the creatures in soil, but the actual soil particles itself. Now, those are the non-living factors. And so together, your biotic, or the living factors, and your abiotic factors, together they make the particular habitat for certain plants and animals. Okay, so different plants and animals live naturally in specific areas. Plants and animals will choose where they live in a specific area, mostly depending on water, food, climate. Remember that an organism or a plant won't live in an area if they're unable to survive, if they have not adapted to survive in that particular habitat. And in our next lesson, we are actually going to be looking at adaptations of animals, or certain adaptations of animals within their specific habitats. Okay, and so it is important to remember that it's not just animals, it's also plants. They will live in a certain habitat because they have been adapted in a certain way to survive and flourish and grow and reproduce within that habitat. And the factors that are important are these. Is there water? So some animals require more water than others. Some animals live in water. Certain plants require more water than others. Certain plants are thicker and succulent, so they're able to retain a lot of water, so they don't need a lot of water. And so different habitats, different plants and animals have adapted according to their specific habitats. Okay, here's just a really cool picture I wanted to put up, just showing different types of habitats. And this is what we are going to be looking at today, is different types of habitats. Now, we know that there are many different types that animals and plants like to live in. And here's just some brief pictures of some of the ones that we are going to discuss in detail today. The most obvious habitat, or the most obvious point that you can by looking at all these pictures, I'm thinking about temperature, from a desert to a snowy, cold region to paradise, sitting on an island, to like a foresty, mountainous area. I must say, out of all of these different habitats, where would you right now want to be? So personally, either I would love to be walking along this beautiful beach, looking down at the clear crystal ocean, maybe seeing a few fish swim because it's so clear, or depending, right now, actually, I think being in the snow, building snowmen, going snowboarding would be really cool. It'd be so much fun right now, and keeping active. I think that would be really, really cool. So where would you want to be right now, and which habitat would you want to be? So I'm going to start off. There are many different habitats, but there are a few main ones that we look at, and I'm going to start off with a desert habitat. Now, a desert is a very warm place, very hot. It is very dry, and it's that air. That air is hot and dry. It's like sitting in a sauna. Okay, for those of you that have been inside a sauna and you know what a sauna is, it's a room where it is just very, very hot and you do sweat or perspire, scientifically speaking, words and vocabulary. And so there is very little rain in the desert. The soil you can see just by looking at the picture, the soil is very sandy. The soil looks dry. The soil looks hot. I don't know if any of you have ever stood on soil, particularly if you go to the beach. So for those of you that live in a coastal region, if you go to the beach on a really hot day, that sand can get very, very hot. And so in desert, the sand gets very hot. And so most animals that live in the desert, they actually sleep during the day because it's actually way too hot to do anything. And then they come out at night, most of them. Okay. Now, there is a specific name that we call those animals that function mostly at night, and we call them nocturnal. Now, there's many animals, not just in the desert. There's other animals that, like your owls and your bats, that are usually predators at night and they sleep during the day. But more so in the desert, a lot of animals are nocturnal, but that is due to the actual weather, not the species of animals, due to the weather. It is too hot to function and come out during the day. And so it's easier to work and be alive and active at night. Some desert animals bury in the ground during the day. Many plants have thick leaves in the desert to retain water. Remember in our previous lesson, we looked at cacti and how thick a cactus is. It needs to retain water because there's very, very little rain. And so plants have adapted to live in desert habitats because to retain as much water as what they can. Most desert animals get their water from the food that they actually eat. So you can see there's not these beautiful lagoons and rivers and things in the desert. And so a lot of animals that have adapted to live in a desert habitat, they get a lot of their moisture and their water from the foods that they eat, which is quite interesting. Right, moving on to a rainforest habitat. How lush does this picture look? Look how green and beautiful and inviting this particular rainforest looks. And I just love the colors of the rainforest. Now, this is just one picture. Go and research different rainforests. It's quite interesting. Now, a rainforest is an environment where rain falls almost every day. As the name suggests, rainforest, rain falls almost every day. So that's why it is so green and it's very wet. It's very damp. The soil is usually always damp because of the continuous rain on a daily basis. And because the rainforest has warm weather all year round, it's warm, it's wet. It can get quite humid as well. So that feeling of when you breathe in air, but it feels like you're breathing in all like tiny little water droplets. And that's when we say that the air is very humid. It's very warm and it's very, sort of the air is moist, if I have to put it like that. Many of these plants are used to make medicines to fight diseases and illnesses. So that's an interesting fact about a lot of the plants in the rainforest, is that a lot of certain species of plants that only grow in the rainforest. Remember, certain species of plants and animals can only grow in certain habitats depending on whether they're able to survive. And a lot of it is climate. So is the climate perfect for that species of plant or animal? Is there enough food and moisture and water? Are they able to reproduce and make more copies of themselves in that habitat? Okay, and so yeah, that's just an interesting fact that some plants and some plants, that are in a rainforest, many are used to actually for medicines that we use today. Interesting fact. Okay, now we move on to a forest habitat. So a forest is different to a rainforest because it is an environment that gets enough rain and warm temperatures for lots of the trees to grow. So it doesn't rain on a daily basis as much as a rainforest does, but a forest, it still is able to rain. And the rain is sufficient for the trees to grow and other plants to flourish and for animals to also live. So it's not as warm, it's not as humid, the temperature is almost sort of just right. And in a normal forest, when the temperature does start to drop, the leaves change color and the leaves eventually fall off the tree, and pretty much autumn and winter will occur when winter comes and the trees lose all of their leaves. And so again, you won't find, this is a moose, you won't find a moose in a rainforest because a moose has sort of adapted to function and live and reproduce and grow in a forest habitat. And a moose is just one example of an animal. There's many types of animals that have adapted to a forest habitat. Okay, now we move on to a habitat that is slightly colder than some of the others. It is called a tundra habitat. So this is a habitat where, as you can see just by looking at the picture, I think the colors are beautiful. I think that the color, the blues and the whites, and I think it's absolutely breathtaking. But by looking at this picture, also a big part of me wants to go and fetch my jacket and put it on. It's very, very cold. And so a tundra habitat is an environment that is very cold, but it's also very windy. It is a treeless area. So as you can see, there's no trees in a tundra area. It is a very, very cold environment. The land is covered with snow and ice for most of the year. So compare this to either a rainforest where it rains most of the year, or a desert where it is very, very dry, hot. Tundra is very cold. Much of the land has ground that is permafrost. Now the word permafrost is another new word that you're learning today. If I break this up, perma and then frost, it basically means that the ground is permanently frozen. Okay, so it's permanently frozen. Summers are also very, very short. So in this particular environment, the animals that have adapted in this environment are very interesting. It's the animals such as polar bears. They've got very thick coats to keep them warm. They have got very big paws to help evenly distribute their weight when they're walking on the ice. They can withstand very cold temperatures when they go swimming and when they're in search of their food. So there are many different animals that have adapted to environments and habitats, such as the tundra habitat. Okay, quite interestingly enough. Now we have a look at a freshwater habitat. So a freshwater habitat, and again, always look at the name. The name gives a lot away. Okay, a freshwater habitat would be an example of a pond, a lake, a stream, or a river. Okay. And in a freshwater habitat, it's not saltwater. Water plants like to grow in or very near to rivers, lagoons, or wetlands. Some animals choose to always be in the water, and others are only sometimes in the water. So in freshwater, here is an example of a crocodile, and so, or an alligator, and this particular species, you can see, and they have their head mostly out, so they just see their eyes on top of the water. Their bodies are inside the water. They are a bit of half and half. They spend time in water and outside of the water. You can see that there are certain plants that like a freshwater habitat, either inside and grow in the actual water, or plants that will grow on the river beds, or just on the edge of the streams or lakes or ponds. Okay, and so that there are various different animals and creatures and plants that prefer a freshwater habitat that is not salty. There's always water readily available. They don't need to rely on rain, and so this is our freshwater habitat. Now, alternatively, we get a saltwater habitat. So this is where we talk about our oceans and our seas, and where the water is rich in salt. Okay. Now, you can see the different plant life. Plants, which we call the coral, the different fish, and the colors under the ocean are beautiful. I haven't scuba dived in a while, but I used to scuba dive, and I can honestly tell you that what you see here in the pictures that are taken under the water, this is exactly what you see under the water. The colors are absolutely beautiful. It is breathtaking. You can't actually explain what you see under the water, and the life under the water, and the animals and the plants and the coral and the textures and the shapes, and it's absolutely beautiful. And so yes, saltwater creatures and species adapt to live in certain saltwater habitats. Okay, now you get those creatures that also like a little bit of half and half, where here is a crab, for example, and a crab prefers to live more or less on the shoreline. Certain species of crab live on the shoreline, where they like to also be in the water but also outside of the water. So other plants and animals choose to live along the shoreline, where the water meets the land. This is because they prefer an environment that is wet, but they are also able to live on land. So they also like a little bit of both. And so certain animals and species are adapted in such a way that they do land and sea, which is very interesting. Animals that live along the shoreline need to have very strong bodies, and most of them have these shells so that they can withstand the pressures of the waves crashing onto them. So even your organisms such as your oysters and mussels that you find on rocks, they have to have these very hard shells, because if you think about how strong waves can be, especially during high tide, when waves are crashing against the rocks or on the shore, the animals need to have these hard bodies, which we call exoskeletons, that you will learn in grade 5. These exoskeletons, or their shells, need to be very strong to protect themselves against the crashing of the waves. And so, grade 4s, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. I hope that you've enjoyed learning about different habitats, and I'm sure some of you are sitting there thinking, oh, I wish I was in this habitat or that habitat or this habitat and that habitat. Again, I always encourage you, go and read a little bit more about the habitats, read about the different plants and animals that live in those specific habitats. The more you read, the more you know, the more you're able to grow. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. But I hope you have a wonderful day, and I shall see you all tomorrow. Hakuna Matata. From me, Miss Kun. Be kind to one another. Bye.